The sun was setting over the Beartooth Mountains, casting long shadows across the dense forest. The air carried the crisp scent of pine and damp earth, a reminder of the wild beauty that still clung to this corner of Montana. Daniel Carter tightened, his grip on the binoculars as he scanned the horizon. His breath came in visible puffs, mingling with the cold breeze that swept through the trees. Beside him, Rachel Myers adjusted her camera, her fingers stiff from the biting chill. For weeks, they had been tracking the last known pack of gray wolves in the region. These animals were once apex predators, rulers of the land, feared and respected by all who encountered them. But now their numbers had dwindled to almost nothing. Centuries of hunting, trapping, and habitat destruction had pushed them to the brink of extinction. What remained was a fragile thread, a small group of wolves trying to survive in a world dominated by humans. Daniel lowered the binoculars and turned to Rachel. "Did you see anything?" she asked, her voice soft but tinged with urgency. He shook his head. "Nothing yet. But we're close. I can feel it." Rachel nodded, though doubt flickered in her eyes. They had spent days hiking through treacherous terrain, following faint paw prints and listening for distant howls. So far, the wolves had eluded them. The two of them had come together out of a shared passion for wildlife. Daniel was an ecologist, a man in his late 30s with a weathered face and a quiet determination. He had spent most of his life studying ecosystems and trying to understand the delicate balance between humans and nature. Rachel, on the other hand, was a photographer. Her work focused on capturing images of endangered species, hoping to inspire others to care about their survival. She was younger than Daniel, with bright eyes and a restless energy that often masked her deep concern for the natural world. They made a good team. Daniel's knowledge of animal behavior complemented Rachel's ability to document moments in time. Together, they hoped to gather enough evidence to convince people to protect what little remained of the wolf population. But time was running out. Rumors had spread about a new government project that planned to clear large sections of the forest for industrial development. If the wolves lost their home, they would have nowhere else to go. As the light faded, Daniel suggested they set up camp near a frozen river. It was a strategic location. Water sources often attracted wildlife, especially during the harsh winter months. They unpacked their gear quickly, pitching a small tent and starting a fire. The flames crackled softly, providing warmth against the encroaching darkness. Rachel sat cross-legged on the ground, sipping hot tea from a thermos while Daniel kept watch. It wasn't long before movement caught his eye. Through the dim light, he spotted a shape moving hesitantly toward the river. Grabbing his binoculars, he focused on the figure. It was a wolf, its fur matted and dirty. Its ribs were visible beneath thin skin, and its gait was uneven, as if every step caused pain. Daniel's heart sank. This was not the majestic creature he had read about in books or seen in documentaries. This was a shadow of what wolves once were. "Rachel," he whispered, motioning for her to join him. She crept silently to his side, raising her camera to capture the scene. As they watched, the wolf stopped at the edge of the river, dipping its head to drink. Even from a distance, they could see how weak it was. "It's starving," Rachel murmured, her voice trembling. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. The sight filled him with anger and sadness. How had humanity allowed things to get this bad? Later that night, as they sat by the fire, Daniel found himself lost in thought. He stared into the flames, replaying the image of the emaciated wolf in his mind. He thought about the history of these animals, their role as apex predators, ruling vast territories across North America. Early settlers had feared them, believing them to be dangerous threats to livestock and human safety. That fear had led to centuries of persecution. Hunters killed wolves for sport, farmers poisoned them to protect their herds, and governments offered bounties for their pelts. What started as survival evolved into domination. Humans no longer saw themselves as part of the ecosystem. They saw themselves as its masters. Forests were cleared, rivers dammed, and entire species wiped out in the name of progress. And now, here they were, standing witness to the aftermath of that arrogance. Rachel broke the silence, her voice gentle. "Do you think we can make a difference?" Daniel hesitated before answering. "I don't know," he admitted. "But we have to try. If we don't, who will?" The next morning they packed up camp and headed back to town. Their goal was to present their findings to local officials, hoping to secure some form of protection for the wolves. They knew it wouldn't be easy. Walter Price, the mayor of the nearest town, was notorious for prioritizing economic growth over environmental concerns. Still, they had to try. When they arrived, they were greeted by a room full of skeptical faces. Daniel projected images of the starving wolf onto a screen, explaining the dire situation in calm, measured tones. Rachel showed her photographs, each one telling a story of struggle and resilience. But despite their efforts, the officials remained unmoved. Walter Price dismissed their concerns with a wave of his hand. "Progress waits for no one," he declared, earning nods of agreement from those around him. Frustration bubbled inside Daniel as they left the meeting. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to lash out. Rachel placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "We'll find another way," she said firmly. Daniel wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at him. How could they possibly fight against something so much bigger than themselves? Back in their cabin, Rachel decided to take matters into her own hands. She wrote an essay detailing the plight of the wolves, accompanying it with her most striking photographs. When she published the piece online, it quickly gained traction. People from all over the country began sharing the story, expressing outrage and demanding action. Among those moved by the article was Emily Dawson, a young activist from Chicago. Inspired by Rachel's words, Emily organized protests outside government buildings, drawing attention to the issue. Meanwhile, Daniel received a call from Dr. Alan Hayes, a biologist working on cutting-edge de-extinction technology. Hayes believed cloning could bring back extinct species, offering a glimmer of hope for the future. But he warned that such efforts would take decades and require significant funding. Daniel listened intently, weighing the possibilities. Could science truly undo the damage humanity had caused? Or was it too late? That evening, as they prepared dinner, Rachel brought up Hayes's proposal. "What do you think?" she asked, stirring a pot of soup. Daniel sighed, leaning against the counter. "I don't know," he admitted. "It feels like playing God, and even if it works, what happens when we mess up again? We can't keep relying on technology to fix our mistakes." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "You're right, but maybe this is a chance to start over, to do better." Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he gazed out the window, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the mountains. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. Whatever decision they made, it would shape the future, not just for the wolves, but for all living creatures. As night fell, Daniel stepped outside, breathing in the cool air. Above him, the stars twinkled brightly, a reminder of the vastness of the universe. For a moment, he felt small, insignificant. And yet he knew that every action mattered. Every choice, no matter how small, rippled outward, affecting the world in ways he might never fully understand. With renewed determination, he returned to the cabin. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to fight for what was right. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace, knowing that he wasn't alone in this battle. Together, he and Rachel, and countless others like them, would continue to stand up for the voiceless, for the wild, and for the fragile beauty of the natural world. The days that followed the meeting with local officials were heavy with disappointment. Daniel and Rachel had poured their hearts into presenting their case, but the lack of response from the town leaders left them feeling defeated. Walter Price's dismissive attitude still echoed in Daniel's mind. Progress waits for no one. The words stung because they revealed a truth neither of them wanted to accept. Many people didn't care about the wolves or the forest. To them, it was just land to be used, resources to be exploited. Back in their cabin, Rachel sat at the small wooden table, scrolling through her laptop. Her fingers tapped impatiently as she stared at the screen. Daniel leaned against the counter, sipping coffee while trying to think of what to do next. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it carried a weight neither could ignore. They both knew time was running out for the wolves. Rachel finally broke the quiet. "We need to reach more people," she said firmly, turning to look at Daniel. "These officials don't listen because they don't feel any pressure. If we can get enough attention, maybe we can force them to act." Daniel nodded slowly. "But how? We're just two people. What can we possibly do against something this big?" Rachel smiled faintly. "We use what we've got. My photos, your research, and the internet. There are millions of people out there who care about animals. If we show them the truth, they'll help us." Her confidence gave Daniel a glimmer of hope. He trusted Rachel's instincts. She had always been good at finding ways to connect with others. Still, he couldn't shake the fear that it wouldn't be enough. But sitting around doing nothing wasn't an option either. That night, Rachel stayed up late writing. She crafted an essay detailing everything they had seen: the starving wolf by the river, the fading paw prints in the snow, the eerie silence where there should have been howls. She described the history of the wolves, how they had once ruled these mountains, and how humanity's greed had pushed them to the edge of extinction. Her words were simple, yet powerful, filled with emotion and urgency. When she finished, she paired the essay with her most striking photographs. One showed the emaciated wolf drinking from the frozen river, its ribs visible beneath matted fur. Another captured the vast emptiness of the forest, a haunting reminder of what had been lost. She uploaded the piece to her website and shared it on social media, tagging environmental organizations and activists she admired. Within hours, the response was overwhelming. People from all over the country began sharing the story, commenting on the photos and expressing outrage. Some offered donations to support Daniel and Rachel's work, while others vowed to spread awareness. Among those moved by the article was Emily Dawson, a young activist from Chicago who had recently graduated with a degree in environmental science. Emily had grown up in the city, far removed from the wilderness Rachel and Daniel worked to protect. But she had always felt a deep connection to nature, thanks to summers spent visiting national parks with her family. When she read Rachel's essay, tears streamed down her face. She felt a surge of anger, not just at the plight of the wolves, but at the apathy of those who refused to help. Determined to make a difference, she organized protests outside government buildings in Chicago, holding signs that read, "Save the wolves and protect our planet." News of the protests reached Daniel and Rachel a few days later. Rachel showed Daniel videos of hundreds of people chanting slogans and waving banners. Seeing so many strangers standing up for their cause brought tears to his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to feel hopeful, but not everyone was supportive. Back in Montana, tensions rose as news of the protests spread. Tigalao, hunters and loggers viewed the campaign as a threat to their livelihoods. Angry comments flooded Rachel's website, accusing her and Daniel of being outsiders who didn't understand the realities of rural life. Some even threatened violence, warning them to leave town before things turned ugly. Despite the backlash, Rachel refused to back down. "They're scared," she told Daniel one evening after deleting another hateful message. "Change is scary, especially when it challenges the way things have always been done. But that doesn't mean we stop." Daniel admired her courage, though he worried about their safety. He suggested they take precautions, locking doors, avoiding isolated areas, and keeping a close eye on their surroundings. Rachel agreed, though she insisted they continue their work. "If we let fear stop us, then they win," she said firmly. As public attention grew, so did pressure on local officials. Walter Price found himself bombarded with calls and emails from concerned citizens demanding action. At first, he tried to ignore the noise, dismissing it as temporary hysteria. But when reporters began showing up at his office, cameras rolling and microphones thrust in his face, he realized he couldn't stay silent forever. In a desperate attempt to save face, Price announced plans to create a sanctuary for the remaining wolves. He held a press conference standing in front of a large map of the proposed area. "This will ensure the survival of these magnificent creatures," he declared, smiling for the cameras. But insiders quickly revealed the truth. The designated land was too small and surrounded by logging operations. It offered no real protection for the wolves. Rachel and Daniel saw through the ruse immediately. "It's a PR stunt," Rachel said angrily, slamming her fist on the table. "He's trying to make it look like he cares, but this won't save them." Determined to expose the lie, they decided to investigate the proposed sanctuary site themselves. Armed with drones and hidden cameras, they hiked deep into the forest, documenting every flaw. They filmed bulldozers tearing through trees, trucks hauling away logs and barren patches of land where lush greenery had once thrived. They recorded interviews with locals who confirmed that the area was unsuitable for wildlife, pointing out its proximity to industrial zones and lack of natural resources. Their footage aired during a live news broadcast, leaving Walter Price humiliated. Reporters grilled him about the discrepancies, forcing him to admit that the sanctuary plan was incomplete. Public outrage reached new heights, and within days, Price resigned from his position. While the victory felt significant, Daniel and Rachel knew it wasn't enough. The wolves were still in danger, and the underlying issues remained unresolved. Around the same time, Dr. Alan Hayes reached out again. His team had made progress in their de-extinction project, successfully cloning a single wolf pup using preserved DNA samples from museum specimens. The pup, fragile and untested, represented a chance to rebuild the population. Hayes invited Daniel and Rachel to visit his lab, hoping they would support his efforts. The idea of cloning sparked mixed emotions in Daniel. On one hand, it offered a lifeline, a way to undo some of the damage humanity had caused. On the other hand, it raised ethical questions. Was it right to interfere with nature in such a profound way? And if they succeeded, would people simply repeat the same mistakes? Rachel, however, was cautiously optimistic. "Think about what this could mean," she said during the drive to the lab. "Not just for the wolves, but for other endangered species. This could change everything." When they arrived, Hayes greeted them warmly and led them to a secure room where the cloned pup was kept. Through a glass window, they saw the tiny creature curled up in a corner, its fur soft and gray. Despite its frailty, it radiated resilience. Daniel felt a lump form in his throat as he watched it twitch in its sleep. "What happens now?" Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hayes sighed. "Now comes the hard part. We need to teach it how to survive in the wild. Without a pack to guide it, it won't know how to hunt or avoid predators. That's where you come in." Daniel hesitated. The responsibility felt enormous, almost unbearable. Could they really step into the role of surrogate parents for this fragile being? And even if they succeeded, what kind of world would they be bringing it into? As they drove back to their cabin, Rachel reached over and placed a hand on Daniel's arm. "We have to try," she said softly. "For them." Daniel nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. He glanced out the window at the endless expanse of forest, wondering if humanity would ever learn to coexist with the natural world, or if their legacy would always be one of loss. The cloned wolf pup, named Luna by Rachel, quickly became the center of Daniel and Rachel's lives. The tiny creature was delicate, its movements hesitant as it explored the world around it. Its fur was soft and gray, a reminder of the wolves that once roamed free in the wild. But Luna wasn't like those wolves. She had no pack to teach her how to survive, no mother to guide her through the challenges of life in the forest. Instead, she relied on Daniel and Rachel, who were determined to give her the best chance possible. Every morning they woke early to care for Luna. They fed her specially prepared meals designed to mimic what she would eat in the wild, meat from local farms, carefully cut into small pieces. They watched as she sniffed the food cautiously before eating, her instincts slowly kicking in. Rachel spent hours playing with her, using toys to simulate hunting scenarios. At first, Luna seemed confused, unsure of what was expected of her. But over time, She began to show signs of improvement. Her movements became quicker, more confident. She started pouncing on objects, practicing the skills she would need to catch prey. Daniel, meanwhile, focused on teaching her about the dangers of the world. He introduced her to recordings of sounds she might encounter in the wild, birds chirping, water flowing, and even the distant growl of bears. At first, the noises startled her, causing her to retreat into the safety of her den. But as she grew accustomed to them, she learned to respond appropriately, freezing in place or backing away when necessary. Despite their efforts, both Daniel and Rachel knew Luna's survival depended on more than just training. The real test would come when she was released into the wild, and that was where things got complicated. The forest surrounding their cabin was beautiful, but it wasn't the safe haven it once was. Logging operations continued nearby, cutting down trees and destroying habitats. Poachers still roamed the area, setting traps and hunting illegally. Even if Luna managed to adapt to the environment, there was no guarantee she would be safe. Rachel often found herself lying awake at night, worrying about the future. She replayed scenarios in her mind. Luna wandering too far and getting caught in a trap, or failing to find enough food during the harsh winter months. Each thought filled her with dread, making it hard to sleep. One evening, she confided in Daniel. "What if we're doing this all wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What if we're setting her up to fail?" Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we can't just give up. We've come this far. If we stop now, what does that say about us?" Rachel nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. She wanted to believe they were making a difference, but the odds felt stacked against them. Still, she couldn't abandon Luna. Not after everything they'd been through. While Daniel and Rachel worked tirelessly to prepare Luna for the wild, Emily Dawson continued her fight on a larger scale. Back in Chicago, she had organized protests that drew national attention. Her passion inspired others to join the cause, and soon, activists across the country were rallying behind the wolves. Social media played a crucial role, spreading awareness and keeping the issue alive in people's minds. Hashtags like Save the Wolves and Protect Our Wildlife trended regularly, drawing support from celebrities, scientists, and everyday citizens alike. Emily also reached out to lawmakers, urging them to pass stronger environmental protections. She wrote letters, made phone calls, and attended meetings, refusing to take no for an answer. Her persistence paid off when several states announced plans to designate new wildlife sanctuaries. These areas would be off-limits to logging and industrial development, providing much-needed refuge for endangered species. But not everyone welcomed the changes. In Montana, tensions between conservationists and locals escalated. Hunters accused activists of trying to take away their way of life, while loggers argued that stricter regulations would cost jobs and hurt the economy. Angry confrontations became common, with both sides digging in their heels. Daniel and Rachel tried to stay out of the conflict, focusing instead on Luna, but it was impossible to ignore the growing divide. One afternoon, while hiking near the proposed sanctuary site, Daniel spotted a group of poachers setting traps. His heart raced as he realized they were dangerously close to where Luna would eventually be released. Without thinking, he confronted them, demanding they leave the area immediately. The men laughed at him, calling him names and mocking his efforts to protect the wolves. When one of them stepped forward threateningly, Daniel backed away, knowing he was outnumbered. He returned to the cabin shaken but determined to prevent such incidents in the future. Rachel listened quietly as he recounted the story, her expression grim. "We can't let them win," she said finally. "If we don't stand up for Luna, who will?" Together, they decided to document the poaching activity, hoping to expose it to the public. Using hidden cameras and drones, they gathered evidence of illegal traps and snares scattered throughout the forest. They sent the footage to news outlets and shared it online, sparking outrage among supporters. The backlash forced local authorities to take action, increasing patrols in the area and arresting several poachers. It was a small victory, but it gave Daniel and Rachel hope that change was possible. As weeks turned into months, Luna grew stronger and more independent. She began venturing farther from the cabin, exploring the surrounding woods under Daniel and Rachel's watchful eyes. They followed her discreetly, noting how she interacted with her environment. She sniffed the air, listened for sounds, and cautiously approached unfamiliar objects. Her progress was slow but steady, and each milestone filled them with pride. One crisp autumn morning, Daniel watched as Luna disappeared into the forest, her tail flicking behind her. For a moment, he imagined hearing distant howls carried on, the wind, echoes of a time when wolves ruled these lands. Then silence returned, heavy and profound. Rachel joined him, placing a comforting arm around his shoulders. "She'll be okay," she said softly. Daniel nodded, though uncertainty lingered in his eyes. As they walked back to the cabin, he reflected on the journey they had taken together. From tracking the last remnants of a dying species to raising a cloned pup, they had faced countless challenges and setbacks. Yet through it all, they had refused to give up. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with obstacles they couldn't predict. But one thing was clear. Their fight wasn't just about saving Luna or the wolves. It was about preserving the delicate balance between humans and nature. It was about learning to coexist with the wild, respecting its beauty and fragility. And most importantly, it was about leaving a legacy of compassion and responsibility for future generations. As they entered the cabin, Daniel glanced at a photograph hanging on the wall. It showed the emaciated wolf they had first encountered by the river, its haunting gaze capturing the tragedy of extinction. Beside it was a newer picture of Luna, her eyes bright with curiosity and life. Together, the images told a story of loss and redemption, a reminder of humanity's capacity for both destruction and healing. For now, Daniel and Rachel could only wait and hope. They had done everything they could to prepare Luna for the wild, but the rest was up to her. Whatever happened next, they knew they had given her the best chance possible. And in doing so, they had taken a step toward a better future, for the wolves, for the forest, and for the planet itself. Months passed, and Luna grew stronger with each passing day. Her once timid movements had transformed into confident strides as she explored the forest around Daniel and Rachel's cabin. She learned to hunt small animals, track scents, and navigate the rugged terrain. Yet despite her progress, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The real test would come when Luna was released into the wild, far from their protection, in a world still hostile to her kind. Rachel noticed his worry one evening as they sat by the fire outside the cabin. "You're thinking about her again, aren't you?" she asked softly, handing him a cup of tea. Daniel nodded, staring into the flames. "I just keep wondering if we've done enough," he admitted. "What happens if she can't survive out there?" Rachel sighed, sitting beside him. "We've given her everything we can," she said firmly. "She's smart, strong, and curious. Those are the tools she needs to make it. We have to trust that." Daniel wanted to believe her, but doubt lingered. He thought about all the challenges Luna would face: harsh winters, scarce food, poachers, and the constant threat of human interference. It wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving. Could a single wolf truly rebuild a population that had been wiped out? The next morning, they decided it was time. Luna had reached an age where she needed independence, and keeping her near the cabin any longer could hinder her ability to adapt. They packed supplies for one last trip into the forest, choosing a remote location deep within what remained of the untouched wilderness. The journey was long and difficult, but neither complained. Their focus was entirely on Luna. When they arrived at the chosen spot, they set up a temporary camp. Rachel placed a collar around Luna's neck, a lightweight device equipped with a GPS tracker. It would allow them to monitor her movements without interfering too much. As they released her into the wild, both held their breath, watching as she sniffed the air and took cautious steps forward. For a moment, Luna paused, turning back to look at them. Her golden eyes seemed to hold a mixture of curiosity and gratitude, before she turned and disappeared into the trees. Daniel felt a lump form in his throat as he watched her go. Rachel placed a hand on his shoulder. "She'll be okay," she whispered, though her voice wavered slightly. Days turned into weeks, and they checked the tracker regularly, following Luna's movements on a map. At first, she stayed close to the release site, exploring the area thoroughly. Then slowly, she began moving farther away, venturing deeper into the forest. Each step she took filled Daniel and Rachel with equal parts pride and anxiety. They celebrated every milestone, her successful hunts, her ability to avoid danger, but they also braced themselves for bad news. One night, as they reviewed the data, Rachel pointed to the screen. "Look," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "She's covering more ground now. That means she's confident." Daniel smiled faintly, though concern still lingered in his eyes. "Confidence won't protect her from everything," he murmured. Meanwhile, Emily Dawson continued her fight on a larger scale. Her efforts had inspired others across the country, sparking a wave of environmental activism. People rallied behind the cause, organizing cleanup drives, planting trees, and advocating for stricter protections for endangered species. Emily herself traveled to Washington, D.C., meeting with lawmakers to push for legislation that would safeguard natural habitats. Her passion and determination earned her recognition, and soon she became a prominent voice in the movement. But not everyone supported her work. Some accused her of prioritizing animals over people, arguing that economic growth should take precedence. Emily faced criticism and even threats, but she refused to back down. "This isn't about choosing sides," she told reporters during an interview. "It's about finding a balance. We can build a future where humans and wildlife coexist." Her words resonated with many, including Daniel and Rachel. They followed her progress closely, drawing strength from her unwavering commitment. Though their roles were different, they shared the same goal: creating a world where creatures like Luna could thrive. Back in Montana, life went on. Logging operations continued in some areas, but thanks to increased patrols and public pressure, illegal activities decreased. Walter Price's resignation had paved the way for new leadership, and the town began taking steps toward sustainable development. While change was slow, it was happening, and that gave Daniel and Rachel hope. One crisp winter morning, Daniel woke to find fresh snow blanketing the ground. He stepped outside, breathing in the cold air, and checked the GPS tracker. Luna was still alive, moving steadily through the forest. Her resilience amazed him. Despite the odds stacked against her, she had managed to carve out a place for herself in the wild. As he stood there, lost in thought, Rachel joined him, wrapping a scarf around her neck. "Do you think she's found others?" she asked quietly. Daniel shook his head. "Not yet, but maybe someday." The idea of Luna encountering another wolf, one that might have survived unnoticed or been part of a secret pack, was both thrilling and terrifying. If she did, it could mean the beginning of a new generation, but it also meant risking heartbreak if something went wrong. Rachel leaned against him, gazing at the horizon. "Whatever happens, we've done our best," she said. "That's all anyone can ask of us." Daniel nodded, though the weight of responsibility still pressed heavily on his shoulders. He thought about the history of wolves, their rise as apex predators, their fall at the hands of humans, and now their tentative return. It was a cycle of destruction and redemption, loss and hope. And standing here, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the forest, he realized that humanity played a crucial role in shaping that cycle. Later that afternoon, they hiked to a nearby ridge, hoping to catch a glimpse of Luna. The snow made tracking difficult, but they followed her trail patiently. When they finally spotted her in the distance, her gray fur blending seamlessly with the landscape, they stopped in awe. She stood tall, scanning the horizon with sharp eyes. For a moment, she reminded them of the wolves they had read about in books: majestic, fearless, and free. "She looks happy," Rachel whispered, lowering her binoculars. Daniel smiled faintly, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. "Yeah," he agreed. "She does." As they turned to leave, Daniel glanced back one last time. Luna had already moved on, disappearing into the vast expanse of white. Watching her vanish, he felt a mix of emotions: pride, sadness, and hope. He knew her journey was far from over, and so was theirs. Protecting the wild wasn't a task that ended. It required constant vigilance, sacrifice, and love. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Rachel pulled out her journal. She flipped through the pages, reading entries they had written over the past year. Each word told a story of struggle, perseverance, and triumph. Closing the book, she looked at Daniel. "We've come a long way," she said softly. He nodded, staring into the flames. "Yeah, we have, but there's still so much left to do." Rachel smiled, reaching for his hand. "Then let's keep going." Together, they resolved to continue their work, not just for Luna, but for all the creatures who called this land home. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they also knew they weren't alone. Across the country, people like Emily were fighting for the same cause, proving that collective action could create real change. As the fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on the walls of the cabin, Daniel allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. Humanity had caused immense harm to the natural world, but it also had the power to heal. Whether through science, activism, or simple acts of kindness, people could choose to make a difference. Outside, the wind howled gently, carrying with it the promise of renewal. Somewhere in the distance, a lone wolf's call echoed through the forest, a sound that hadn't been heard in years. Daniel closed his eyes, listening intently. For the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. Whatever the future held, he knew one thing for certain: the wild was resilient, and so were those who fought to protect it. The months that followed Luna's release into the wild were a mix of hope and uncertainty for Daniel and Rachel. They checked the GPS tracker daily, their eyes glued to the screen as they traced her movements across the forest. Each dot on the map represented not just a location, but a story, a tale of survival, adaptation, and resilience. Luna was learning to navigate the challenges of her new life, and though she faced dangers every day, she pressed on. One morning, as Daniel sipped his coffee and studied the tracker, he noticed something unusual. Luna had stopped moving. The blinking dot remained fixed in one spot for hours longer than usual. His heart raced as he considered the possibilities. Had she been injured, caught in a trap, or worse? Rachel entered the room, tying her hair back with a scarf. "What's wrong?" she asked, noticing the tension in his posture. "She hasn't moved," Daniel replied, pointing to the screen. "It's been hours." Rachel frowned, pulling up a chair beside him. "Maybe she's resting or hunting," she suggested, trying to stay optimistic. But even as she spoke, doubt crept into her voice. They both knew how fragile Luna's situation was. After debating what to do, they decided to investigate. Packing essentials like food, water, and medical supplies, they set out toward the coordinates displayed on the tracker. The journey was long and grueling, taking them through dense thickets, icy streams, and steep inclines. As they approached the location, their anxiety grew. What if they arrived too late? When they finally reached the spot, they found Luna lying under a cluster of pine trees. At first glance, she appeared unharmed, but her breathing was shallow and her body trembled slightly. Daniel knelt beside her, examining her carefully. He spotted a gash on her hind leg, partially hidden by her fur. It wasn't deep, but it looked infected. "She must have gotten into a fight," Rachel said, her voice tight with worry. "Or maybe stepped into something sharp." Daniel nodded, reaching for the first aid kit. "We need to clean this wound," he said. "If we don't, it could get worse." They worked quickly but gently, cleaning the injury and applying antiseptic. Luna flinched at their touch, her golden eyes watching them warily. But she didn't resist, perhaps sensing their intentions. "We're good. When they finished, Rachel stroked her head softly. "You're going to be okay," she murmured, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to reassure, Luna or herself. For the next few days, they stayed close to her, keeping an eye on her recovery. Slowly, Luna regained her strength, resuming her explorations with renewed energy. Watching her bounce back filled Daniel and Rachel with relief, but it also reinforced the harsh reality of her world. The forest was beautiful, but it was also dangerous, a place where survival demanded constant vigilance. As winter deepened, snow blanketed the landscape, turning the forest into a silent, frozen expanse. Food became scarce, and Luna's movements slowed. She spent more time resting and less time roaming, conserving her energy for the coldest months. Daniel and Rachel monitored her closely, ensuring she stayed healthy despite the challenges. During this time, Emily Dawson's efforts gained even more momentum. Her advocacy work had inspired others to take action, and communities across the country began organizing initiatives to protect wildlife. In Montana, volunteers planted native trees to restore damaged habitats, while schools incorporated lessons about conservation into their curriculums. People were starting to see the value of coexistence, understanding that protecting nature wasn't just about saving animals, it was about preserving the planet for future generations. Emily traveled to Montana to meet Daniel and Rachel, eager to see their work firsthand. When she arrived at their cabin, she was greeted by the sight of Luna's paw prints in the snow leading away from the property. "She's incredible," Emily said, her eyes shining with admiration. "You've done amazing things here." Rachel smiled, though her expression was tinged with humility. "We've just tried to give her a chance," she said. "The rest is up to her." Over dinner, they discussed the broader implications of their efforts. Emily shared stories of other endangered species making comebacks thanks to dedicated conservation programs. "It's proof that change is possible," she said. "But we can't stop now, there's still so much to do." Daniel nodded, leaning back in his chair. "I keep thinking about the bigger picture," he admitted. "Even if Luna survives, what happens to the rest of the ecosystem? Wolves are just one piece of the puzzle," Emily agreed. "That's why education is so important. If people understand how everything is connected, the forests, the rivers, the animals, they'll be more willing to protect it all." The conversation lingered in Daniel's mind long after Emily left. He realized that their fight wasn't just about saving wolves, it was about fostering a deeper connection between humans and the natural world. For centuries, humanity had viewed itself as separate from nature, dominating and exploiting it without thought for the consequences. But the truth was far simpler. Humans were part of the ecosystem, dependent on its health and balance just like any other species. Spring arrived, slowly, melting the snow and bringing new life to the forest. Birds returned to the trees, filling the air with song, and streams swelled with fresh water. Luna seemed rejuvenated, her movements faster and more energetic. Daniel and Rachel watched her grow stronger, marveling at her ability to adapt. One evening, as they sat outside the cabin, Daniel noticed something strange on the tracker. Luna had stopped moving again, but this time the pattern was different. Instead of remaining stationary for hours, she alternated between short bursts of activity and brief pauses. Curious, they decided to investigate. Hiking to the location, they discovered a scene that took their breath away. Luna stood beside another wolf, a male larger and darker in color. Their bodies were close, their tails wagging slightly as they sniffed each other cautiously. For a moment, Daniel and Rachel froze, unsure whether to approach or retreat. But the wolves seemed unconcerned by their presence, focused entirely on each other. "They've found each other," Rachel whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. The sight filled him with a profound sense of joy and relief. After months of wondering if Luna would ever encounter another wolf, here she was, standing face to face with a potential mate. Over the following weeks, the two wolves stayed together, forming a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. They hunted side by side, explored the forest together, and rested beneath the same trees. Through the tracker, Daniel and Rachel observed their movements, noting how they complemented each other perfectly. It was as if Luna had known exactly what she needed to survive, and now she had found it. Word of the pair spread quickly, drawing attention from scientists and conservationists eager to study their behavior. Dr. Alan Hayes reached out, excited by the possibility of a new pack forming. "This is unprecedented," he told Daniel during a phone call. "If they succeed, it could pave the way for reintroducing more cloned wolves into the wild." Daniel listened quietly, feeling a mixture of pride and apprehension. He wanted to believe that Luna and her companion represented a turning point, a chance to rebuild what had been lost. But he also knew the road ahead would be difficult. The forest was still fragmented, and human interference remained a constant threat. Despite these challenges, Daniel and Rachel refused to give up. They continued monitoring Luna and her mate, documenting their progress and sharing updates with supporters. Their story inspired others to take action, proving that even small victories could spark widespread change. As summer approached, the forest transformed once again, bursting with greenery and teeming with life. Luna and her companion thrived, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Watching them from afar, Daniel felt a deep sense of gratitude for Luna's resilience, for Rachel's unwavering support, and for the countless individuals who had joined the fight to protect the wild. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Rachel turned to him with a smile. "Do you think we'll see pups someday?" she asked, her voice filled with hope. Daniel hesitated before answering. "Maybe," he said finally. "But even if we don't, we've already made a difference. That's what matters." Rachel nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder. Together they gazed at the stars, listening to the sounds of the forest. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, a sound that carried with it the promise of renewal and hope. Whatever the future held, they knew one thing for certain. The wild was resilient, and so were those who fought to protect it.